Whenever a general election comes around in Singapore, there will be calls by some voters for opposition parties to form a coalition to compete against the PAP. But there has never been a full, comprehensive opposition coalition in Singapore, unlike what we see in some other countries. How do we explain this? What are opposition coalitions? When will we see one in Singapore? Political parties can form coalitions with each other during two time periods, before elections and after elections. Parties usually form coalition governments after elections when no one party wins a majority of the seats in the legislature to form a majority government. This situation is typically known as a hung parliament. Hung parliaments are very common in the advanced European democracies, but are also becoming increasingly common in Asia. For example, after the 2022 general elections in Malaysia, no one party or alliance won a majority of seats in the Malaysian legislature. Hence, the Pakatan Harapan Alliance and the Barisan Nasional Alliance eventually formed a coalition government called the Unity Government. In Singapore, because the PAP is such a dominant party, the chances of a hung parliament is very low. Therefore, we rarely imagine the PAP forming a coalition government with other political parties after an election. Instead, what we hear often is the idea that Singapore's opposition parties should form a coalition before the elections to compete against the PAP. To form such a coalition, opposition parties must do two things. The first thing they must do is typically known as seat negotiations. What they actually do is to bargain and negotiate with each other over which one party should contest in which constituency against the PAP. If they successfully come to an agreement, then only one opposition party contests against the PAP in each constituency across the electoral map. In this way, opposition parties are able to aggregate all the opposition votes in that constituency. This helps them to maximize their chances of winning in that constituency. For example, we saw that in the 2015 and 2020 general elections, approximately 95% of all the constituencies in Singapore had only one opposition party contesting against the PAP. However, if they fail to come to an agreement and have two or even three opposition parties contest against the PAP in the constituency, then the votes of opposition voters will be split. In such a case, even though opposition parties might still have a chance of winning, the chances of winning will be minimized. The second thing that opposition parties must do if they want to form a full coalition before elections is to campaign together with each other. What this means is that they must campaign using a common coalition logo, a common coalition name, and a common coalition manifesto. Opposition leaders should also endorse each other and help each other to campaign. When opposition parties do this, they do a few things. First, they show unity towards voters, and voters have more confidence that this is a coalition of people who are serious and capable of running the country. Second, they make more visible and concrete what voters can expect if they really win and form the government. As you can imagine, doing part 1 and part 2 of opposition coalitions entails potentially a lot of benefits, but also a lot of costs to opposition parties. On the potential benefits, opposition parties get to maximize their vote share where they contest and maximize their probability of winning. This potential benefit is not guaranteed, however, because it depends on how voters react to the opposition coalition. If a large majority of voters like the dominant party and want to vote for it, like in Singapore, then no amount of opposition coalition formation will persuade voters to vote for opposition parties. On the other hand, the upfront cost of coalition formation is definitely guaranteed and are oftentimes very large. For example, opposition parties who do seat negotiation must give up their chance to contest in certain constituencies. They may be reluctant to do this because they may have invested a lot of effort in reaching out to voters there. Furthermore, opposition parties who campaign together have to dilute their own party brands. Opposition party leaders have to listen to each other and work together instead of doing what they want. You can imagine opposition party leaders who have a history of animosity towards each other don't want to work together with each other. They may also be very protective of their own party brands. Ultimately, because the upfront costs of coalition formation are so high and so guaranteed, and the potential benefits of coalition formation are so unpredictable, we rarely see opposition coalitions contesting against dominant parties around the world. This same explanation also explains why we rarely see opposition coalitions forming before elections in Singapore.